Thank you for joining our Wednesday evening Bible study. Please stay tuned for some important announcements immediately following the service.
From the King James Version, Luke the 5th chapter, verses 1 through 11. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret and saw two ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them and washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, Launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answering him said, We have toiled all night, and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word I will let down the net. And when they had done this, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. And they beckoned unto their partners which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. When Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he was astonished at all that were with him, and the draught of fishes which he had taken. So was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. When they brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. The grass withers, the flowers thereof fade away, but the word of our God shall stand forever. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord. The sports world has been shaken, and many of us, by the recent events in the life of Sha'Carri Richardson, a young lady from Dallas who ran track at LSU, arguably, based upon the time when she was 19, one of the 5 fastest women to ever live. She qualified for the Olympics in the 100-meter and was going to run on the relay, but after testing positive for THC, marijuana, she was disqualified for 30 days and was unable to participate in the Olympics. I want to say a couple of things real quick as I prepared to preach this sermon. One is, people have asked me what my thoughts were about her experience, and I'm at the point now, the older I get, the less I have to say about most things. As a matter of fact, I think one of the problems is too many of us have comments about everything. Number one, we don't know that much because our knowledge is limited. But number two, not that many people are concerned what our opinions are. But I do want to tell you what impressed me about her. What impressed me about her was after she tested positive, she said these words on the Today Show: I want to take responsibility for my actions. I know what I did, I know what I'm supposed to do, and I'm allowed not to do. And I still made that decision. I'm not making an excuse. I'm not looking for empathy in my case. It was a devastating failure. To practice all your life for that one shining moment and to have it taken away. But what really impressed me were these words that Sha'Carri said: I may not make the Olympics, but I will be back next year for the World Championships. What impressed me with what Sha'Carri said, she accepted responsibility. She said, I did it, I'm wrong, don't want to whitewash that. But she said to us when she said, I'll be back, is that in life, failure does not have to be fatal, and it doesn't have to be final. That in life, when we go through failures, they can alter our future, but they don't have to abort our future. And the great tragedy with many of us is we don't understand that with Jesus, you can have a future even after failure. Now, I need to say a word. There is a term going on, they call it cancel culture, that says when somebody messes up, we just cancel them, we write them off. I don't know what the culture is doing. I'm not an expert on zeitgeist, the mood, but I do know this, that the church has to be careful because for a long time, the church has had a cancel culture. In the church, we got to be careful because if we're not careful, the church stands right on the edge of being an entity that shoots our own wounded. And when somebody messes up in the church, when they make a mistake, we write them off. And we're quick to join the bandwagon that says, I knew they wasn't going to be nothing the whole time. I've come to tell you that we serve a God who offers a future after failure. And I don't know who I'm talking to. I don't know who the devil has told you you've been written off. I don't know who looked at you funny in church. I don't know what broke your heart that made you give up on the church. But I've stopped by to tell you that with Jesus, you can have a future even after failure. The amazing thing about God is that when God looks for a vehicle to use, he's not like us. God does not go to the showroom to find brand new with all the gadgets. That when God gets a vehicle, he goes to the salvage yard to pick up somebody who's already been in a wreck. I think that's what the lesson today of these fishermen teaches us. When Jesus is picking his first disciples, it is that failure does not have to be final, and it does not have to be fatal. And God offers us a future after failure. When we look here in this 5th chapter of the book of Luke, Jesus is coming. His ministry is taking off. As a matter of fact, we're about to watch him pick some of his first disciples. Ministry is blowing up. In the 4th chapter, we saw him heal Peter's mother-in-law. The reputation is growing. The crowds are pressing upon him. That's a word you will see often in the King James. They're strong. And it gets to the point where Jesus says, now all these people are here. But when Jesus comes, he says to Peter, let me get on your boat and launch it out. Because I've got something I want to say. It's interesting to me. What's interesting to me is Matthew Henry says that Jesus takes Peter's boat and turns it into a pulpit. He takes a fishing boat and makes a pulpit. Matthew Henry says that every fishing boat isn't a pulpit, but every pulpit ought to be a fishing boat. Let me just walk you through what has happened. Can I talk to you first about the disappointing venture? The Bible says when we pick up on these fellas, they are washing their nets because Peter tells us that they have gone out and all night they have fished and caught nothing. They have experienced failure at a high level, and here it is. There is, when we look at them, this text gives us the loss of hope because they are washing the nets. It means that they have given up on fishing. They have thrown in the towel now. They're washing the nets because all night long they have been fishing and they've not taken anything. Do you see this loss of hope? It's a loss of hope because of the lateness of the hour. They are in the place where the fish should be. They've lost hope because for Peter, this isn't a fishing trip. It's what he does for a living. He's in the right place. He's at the right time with all the necessary equipment and still nothing. Have you ever been there? When it looks like your best efforts are futile? Have you ever been in a place where it looks like you've just been standing still, where you tried, you gave your best in a relationship? Nothing. Did your best at a job? Nothing. some ministry you were committed to? Nothing. And for some of us, if we're honest with ourselves, this pandemic kind of found us in a place where we didn't feel like failures, but we felt like our work was futile. We'd done the best we could, but we couldn't see ourselves advancing. We were like an army who had been given mark time march. We almost had the bubblegum syndrome, where we had a whole lot of activity but no advancement. No matter how much you chew gum, when you get finished, it's going to still be in the same spot where you started. I need to suggest something to you that just makes me want to shout. Not just the loss of hope or the lateness of the hour, because it's been all night. But the great tragedy for Peter and the fishermen in the text isn't the loss of hope or the lateness of the hour. It's the lack of the holy. Because Peter meets Jesus in chapter 4, but he goes back to his life in chapter 5. Here is a shout in the text. Here's something to tweet. Here's something to write in the chat box. We are failures, even at the familiar, if we leave out the holy. That there is nothing you can do in life effectively if you don't invite Jesus in. I'm preaching already. We are failures even at the familiar when we exclude the holy. They are engaged in a disappointing venture. He knew how to fish. He knew where to fish. He had fishing equipment. But he meets Jesus in chapter 4 at his house and goes back. And I need to tell you that if ever you try to go back to doing what you used to do before you met Jesus, it's a setup for failure. But in the midst of this disappointing venture, they receive a divine visitor. Because they had the night and nothing, but thank God for the master and the morning. Here is a shout. Jesus knows how to come where you are. And I don't need everybody, but I wish I had somebody who would testify that Jesus knows right where you are at your place of brokenness. He comes to where the people are. They are on the seashore. They are here. They have been all night fishing and caught nothing, but Jesus knows how to show up in the morning. And I need to suggest to you that the good thing about Jesus is you don't have to step up your game. You don't have to dress up. Jesus knows how to come to you on your level, and he will come to you at your level so he can move you to the next level. See, here is the wonderful thing that the pandemic has done. It has made us go. Here's some history. Whenever the church has been her most effective, it was at a time when she couldn't stay in one place. Check the biblical record. Whenever God's church has really done great work, it was when they were in a time of challenge and they had to move out. You act like you don't believe me. That's what James says to those of you who are in the diaspora. That's what happened with the church in Acts. They were under persecution and they moved out. See, here's what the devil doesn't understand. I was riding with a friend of mine. He was drinking coffee and he was telling me about coffee. I was sharing with some people today. I don't drink coffee. When I was a boy, they told me that coffee would make you dark, and I didn't need the help. Come on, talk to me now, y'all. My wife likes coffee, but it's obvious that she's attracted to the dark. But anyway, I was riding with my friend, y'all, and my friend is drinking coffee, and he says this about this coffee. He said, these coffee beans are amazing things. He said, the more you grind them, the stronger the coffee gets. Let me push rewind, because somebody... He said these coffee beans are amazing things because the more you grind them, the stronger they get. And all you got to do to see how strong they really are is just add hot water. What the enemy doesn't understand about the church is if you really want to see a believer do their very best, just put them in a grinding place and add some hot water, the stronger we'll get. Here it is. Jesus goes out to the lake, and the danger with the church is we spend so much time fishing in the pool of the saved that we don't understand God has not called us to move people from one church to another. That our target audience is never somebody who goes to another church. Our target audience are people who are by the pools of life who have never met the Savior. He goes to the place, but watch what he does. Even after he goes to this place, watch his position. He says to Peter, now let me get on your boat. And with the authority of a sovereign Lord, he says, now launch me out. Here it is. If you're really going to win people, you got to go where they are. But you can't go and be like they are. You got to go where they are, but he says set a distance. One of the troubling things with me, and you've heard me talk about the church has to balance between being raw and being real, is we like to put too much of our business out. I thought that would be quiet. We major in letting folk know just how bad we can be. But whenever you major in letting folk know all of your business and how bad you are, that's not a testimony about God. That's some dry bragging about you. Preach, delving at you, son, if you got to do it by yourself. He says, set a distance between me and them. Set them out. As a matter of fact, he says, take me out. What we do as believers is we go where people are, but we set a distance so they can see what it is they ought to become. You don't have to outdrink and outcuss the lost. No, what you need to do is try to be some kind of an example of how they can become better. Instead of you taking up all of their habits, maybe you ought to invite them to take up some of yours. He goes to their place, but then he changes the position. Master comes in the morning. He comes while he is here. You can read the text. He says, set them out. But here's what I like about the Lord, y'all. It's amazing to me. When I told you what Jesus does, Jesus meets us at our level. Watch his provision. He goes there, and here is what happens. Jesus understands that the people need preaching. So he teaches them. But Peter needs some practice. He needs practice of the fact that Jesus is who he says. So he says to Peter, he says to the people, let me teach you. He says to Peter, let me show you. He has him to throw the net so that Peter can understand the kind of God that he has. I'm going to shout when I think about the fact that every time God gives us a test, Miss Amanda, most teachers will give their students tests so they can see what kind of student they got. But here's what Jesus does. Jesus will give us tests so the student can see the kind of teacher they got. And he comes and shows to the people the preaching, but he says to Peter, let me show you and your partner some practice. And when they throw out the net, they bring it back in. Here is the shout in this text. The shout in this text is not even just the position or the place or even the provision. We get excited because there is the promise of the morning. Every time you read about morning in Scripture, it is a hope. You remember when Jacob wrestled with God. God said to him, I got to go because I can't be here in the morning. I wondered what was the issue with morning. If you've been fighting all night, you fight a little while longer. You see, God can't fight with us because he made some promises to us about the morning. He says that weeping may endure for the night, but joy got to come in the morning. He promised that his compassions would not fail, for his mercies are new every morning. What God says to us is that if you make it to the morning, everything will be all right. And if you are here this morning, it means God has given you another chance. If you can just hold out till the morning, if you can just make it through the night, if you can just hold out, everything will be all right. And I don't need everybody, but I need about 13 people up in here. to testify that you know what a dark night feels like, but you know what it's like to have Jesus show up in the morning. Anybody here ever had him show up in the morning? I mean, you spent the night worried about this and worried about that, and in the morning, if he didn't make the load lighter, he made your back stronger in the morning. You ever been worried over something, you didn't know how it was going to work out, and when you got there, God had already worked it out in the morning. You ever cried all night and you wondered what God was doing, and God showed you that just because I wasn't making noise didn't mean I wasn't working while you were moaning. I was moving. I've already worked it out in the morning. I wish those folk would tell you, those ladies would tell you, that we saw him die. We saw him die. He was graveyard dead, and we went by looking for him, but in the morning we saw where he used to be, because he was risen, as he said. Here's a final word. Here's a final word. This text says a word about a disappointing venture, the night and the nothing. This text says a word about a divine visitor, the master and the morning. But this text says a word about a developing vocation, about the nets and the nevertheless. It's in the text. I'm not even making it up. When you read this text, first of all, you got to look at Peter's sincerity. Here's what I like about failure, is that if you're willing to admit it to God, God can do something about it. Watch what Peter says. Jesus says, launch out into the deep so you can drop your net. Peter said, no, wait a minute. We've been fishing all night, and we've taken nothing. Here it is. My pastor used to say to anybody you can't shame, you can't help. And one of our problems is we want to major in acting like we got it together. And that's all right for you to do in front of me. But if God is going to help you, you got to acknowledge that you need his help. And you got to be careful. So Peter says to him, we have failed at the familiar. We fished all night and we haven't taken anything, literally nothing. And you're going to tell us to come? But Peter moves from this, and watch what he does. There is in Peter this element of surrender, because he says to him, at your word. Nevertheless, at your word. Now, I've been around Marvin Harris long enough to know something, that fishermen don't like to take advice from folk who don't fish. Watch. Peter isn't a Saturday morning fisherman. He does this for a living. And not only does he do it for a living, but he's with other people who are partners. First time you see that word partners, it has to do with people who are in the same business. The second time it has to do with the people who are on his boat. Watch the text. Peter says, now we tried. As a matter of fact, night is the best time to catch the fish. And everybody knows that if you're going to fish in the morning, you fish in the shallow, not in the deep. And to mess things up, one commentator, Blvd, said that when Jesus says to him to throw out the net, that these nets were large white nets, that the reason they used them at night was because during the day they were visible to the fish. But if you say throw them down, am I the only person who God has ever given some directions to and you wanted to say, are you for real? I mean, God ever asked you to forgive somebody and you told him like me, no, they don't deserve forgiveness. And then he said if they did, it wouldn't be forgiveness. Sometimes being a Christian means that even when what God says doesn't make good sense, I got to do it anyway. Nevertheless, at thy word. But let me show you something interesting in this text. He has some surrender, but Peter still has some skepticism. I'm not making it up. Jesus says to Peter, and you can walk with me in this text. Watch this. Jesus says in verse 4, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a draw. Peter says to Jesus, we've toiled all night, verse 5, nevertheless at thy will I will let down the net. Don't miss me. In verse 7, when Peter calls the people over, it's because in verse 6, the net broke. I'll watch this again. I want you to watch me. Jesus says in verse 4, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a draught. Peter says, nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. Verse 2 says they were washing their nets. Verse 6 says, and their net broke. Here it is, because I know you wanted to shout with me. Jesus told Peter to let down the nets. Peter said, I'm going to do it, but I ain't all in. I'm going to let down a net. And here's what I like about God. God will bless even a little faith. But he shows us that your blessings will become burdens if you don't know how to handle them. They got nets. The Bible says they were washing their nets. And the fact that they were washing them meant that they intended to go back out. Jesus says, throw down your nets. Peter says, I'll let down a net. And that net couldn't handle all that God has. How many times do we lose blessings because God says, give me nets, and you give him a net? If you want him to bless us. Westside, if we want God to do something, we don't need a net faith. We need some nets faith. Faith that steps out even when we tried it and it didn't work. If Jesus said it. I wish I had some nets folk in here who can say, I'm all in. I'm throwing it. I'm throwing in. Here is a shout in this text. Y'all, here is a shout. If believers could get to the point where we understand that we are not in competition, but we are comrades, we are confederates, we are partners with other churches. Watch what Peter does. Peter has some folk on his boat, but when the Lord blesses Peter with more fish than his boat could handle, Peter put some fish on somebody else's boat. We are not in the business of taking fish from other folk. We are in the business of saying Westside's worship ain't for everybody, but if you don't like it here, we want you in the kingdom. Find a place you like. Because let me tell you the thing about fishing with nets. When you fish with nets, you catch all kind of stuff. When you fish with a rod and a reel, you can shoot for bass, or you can shoot for catfish, you can shoot for crappie. But when you fish with a net, whatever comes in, and it may be that what you bring in ain't for your liking, but don't turn them out. Peter called the folk on. It's some more boats out here. And Peter says, you're in the same business that I'm in. I want to put some fish on your boat. The goal of Westside isn't just to fill this church. We are about the business of filling the kingdom. And if somebody joins on Westside Worldwide and they live in Houston, we can find them a church there. If they live in College Station, we can find. If they live in Virginia, we can find them a church there. If they live in Dallas and we ain't their flavor, we can find them a church. We got enough fish to put on somebody else's boat. I'm through. I'm through. But I need to say a word about the sovereign Lord. But I said a word about his skepticism, his surrender. I said a word about his sincerity. Now let me say a word about the sovereign. Jesus says to Peter, when Peter pulls up his net, his boat is about to sink. Here's a shout, y'all. They fished in the same place. Jesus just said, cast your net. The Lord is so sovereign, he knew where the fish were. But he also knew where to tell them to be. Here is the thing. Peter didn't know, but Jesus did. And when we start fishing, we act like we got to have all the ideas. We're getting ready to go back in church, and we keep trying to act like, oh, we figure it out here. Sunday school meets here, church meets here. Oh, God. Listen, we don't know, but Jesus does, and we work for him. Y'all ain't going to shout with me. I don't have to be smart enough to know all the answers. I know the one who wrote the book. I don't have to know the answers. So he says to the fish, get in the net. From same place, they fished at a better time. You're going to see the net. Peter had more than he could handle. Here it is. My pastor, A.C. Stapleton, some years ago we were talking. He was telling me he had gone back to his high school reunion in Ennis. Graduated in 1965, and he telling me about a man there named Richard Johnson. They won the state football championship his last year, and Richard had scored the winning touchdown. But that's not how the story started. Richard had been called by the coach to come in, and he fumbled the ball in the state championship. Imagine how the team must have looked at him. Stapleton asked him, said, man, what was going through your mind? He said, I was hurt, I was sad, I had let the coach down. He said, but when he called my name, late in the game, I knew he was giving me another chance. Here is my exit. Two things I want to leave letting you know about God. First of all, I want you to know he's the God of another chance. That your failure does not have to be final. You can have a future because God has been calling your names. You fumbled the ball. Yeah, you messed up bad, but he's waiting to put you back in the game. He's calling your name because he's the God of another chance. I see you looking at me and say, Pastor, I heard he was the God of a second chance. No, I used up my second chance about 14 minutes after my first chance. As a matter of fact, I've messed up so many chances, I don't even have a record. But the good news is that whatever number you're on, he's the God of that chance. That you cannot fall so low, you can't mess up so much that God won't give you another chance. I wish I had some people in here who understand that before they knew about saving the world, God was already in the recycling business. Because somebody here messed up. Somebody here had your name written off. Somebody here had your friends give up on you. Somebody here had church give up on you. But the God we serve called your name, and he has given you another chance. But there's something else I want you to know. He's not just the God of another chance, that when he gives you another chance, that when he blesses you, he becomes the God of more than enough. Thanks be to God for a God like ours, who in the midst of Peter's skepticism gave Peter more fish. Even when Peter had failed, God gave him another chance, and God gave him more than enough. I don't need everybody, but there ought to be somebody here today at the Westside Church who can testify that when God gives you another chance, he'll make you better than you were before. Is there anybody here who can say, I'm a witness that he'll give you another chance, that he will pick you up and he will dust you off. He'll put your feet on solid ground, that when they write you off, he'll write you back in. When they turn away, he'll come get you. Somebody listening to me, you've been ready to quit, but God will give you another chance right where you are, right today, just as you are. You can come to him and he will. He will give you another chance.
Westside, here are our announcements for the week. Registration for Westside's February 9th Winter Masquerade Ball has been extended until January 26th. You don't want to miss this elegant night of dinner, dancing, and much more, so register soon at WBCCHURCH.org. Join us on January 14th as Westside celebrates the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during the 9:45 a.m. worship service. In observance of MLK Day, January 15th, Westside offices will be closed and there will be no ministry meetings. The annual Prayer and Stewardship Summit is coming up January 20th at 9 a.m. Don't miss out on this opportunity to deepen your spiritual journey and strengthen your stewardship practices. The keynote speaker will be Reverend John McIver, and Sister Linda Jackson will deliver a presentation on estate planning. Register at WBCCHURCH.org.
Hello, Westside Baptist Church family. I am Deacon Mark Wilcox, and a part of our 40th anniversary celebration for 2024, I would like to introduce you to our Westside Baptist Church 40 for 40. This is an opportunity to recognize 40 past and present Westside members who have impacted the ministry or had a spiritual significance in your growth and walk in the Lord because of their service here at Westside. You may also honor a Westside member who has been called home to glory. The honorees will be recognized during our worship services throughout the year. We will honor them with a certificate of recognition and a brief video. Nominations can be made on the church website. A selection committee of long-tenured members will coordinate with the honorees on dates and information that is needed. Thank you, Westside family, and God bless you and yours.
Hello, Westside family. In the book of Nehemiah, the 9th chapter, verse 21, Ezra reminds the children of Israel that for 40 years God sustained them in the wilderness. Their clothes didn't wear out and their feet did not swell. In fact, he said, they lacked for nothing. Westside stands on the same promise. God has been both our protection and provision in our past, and now we see his providence and his promise in our present. Let me invite you to be a part of our 40 for 40 extension. Deacon Mark Wilcox has told you of one 40 for 40 part. The second part is, let's invite 40 people to come celebrate what God has done in our lives. Come join us as we commemorate our past, we celebrate our present, and we anticipate the promises of God for our future. Thanks, fam.
For additional information regarding any of these announcements and much more, please visit us at WBCChurch.org. Weekly announcements are also available on the Westside YouTube